You open an app, tap a video hosted thousands of miles away, and it starts playing almost instantly. For most of us, this process feels completely weightless. We use terms like wireless connection and the cloud. We look up at cell towers and imagine our data floating easily through the air or bouncing off satellites in the vacuum of space. But the cloud is a lie. When you send a message across an ocean or execute an international bank transfer, your data is not traveling through the sky. It is moving through a physical, tangible cord, a line roughly the thickness of a garden hose, resting in the dark, freezing mud at the very bottom of the sea. This map shows the physical backbone of the modern world. There are over 500 active submarine cables crisscrossing the globe right now. Over 99% of all international data traffic travels through this underwater web. Satellites handle less than 1%. Operating this system means confronting arguably the most hostile environment on the planet. At the bottom of the Atlantic, the water pressure is equivalent to an elephant standing on a postage stamp. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and the terrain is a jagged landscape of deep trenches and active volcanic fault lines. Keeping the modern world functioning requires solving a massive physical problem, sending fragile pulses of light across thousands of miles of this exact environment without those pulses fading, breaking, or being crushed. The actual data is carried by extremely pure optical glass fibers. Each is about the thickness of a human hair, transmitting data via lasers fired at the speed of light. Because you cannot simply drop hair-thin glass into the Mariana Trench and expect it to survive, the fibers are housed in a copper or aluminum tube filled with water-resistant gel. This is surrounded by thick polycarbonate to prevent water ingress, then braided steel wires to provide immense tensile strength, all wrapped in dense polyethylene plastic. The deep-sea cable is kept relatively thin, just over an inch in diameter, relying on the immense, crushing water pressure to lock it firmly into the seabed. But as the cable approaches the shoreline, the danger changes entirely. Shallow coastal water brings the constant threat of dropped anchors from commercial freighters and heavy nets dragged by deep-sea fishing trawlers. To survive here, the cable is wrapped in significantly more steel armor, swelling to the thickness of a grown man's arm. Armor protects the hardware from the intense pressure and external physical hazards. It cannot, however, solve the physics of distance. Even through the purest, most flawlessly manufactured glass on Earth, light eventually fades. If you fire a laser into a fiber optic cable in New York, the light signal will disperse, scatter, and become completely unreadable long before it reaches the middle of the Atlantic. This requires an active physical mechanism spaced out across the ocean floor. Spliced into the cable every 30 to 50 miles is a piece of heavy hardware called an optical repeater. Housed in solid titanium cylinders, these massive underwater amplifiers catch the weakening light signal, optically boost it using specialized lasers, and fire it out the other side with renewed strength. These repeaters require continuous electricity to run, and there are 0 power outlets at the bottom of the ocean. To solve this, the cable itself is electrified. That inner copper tube surrounding the glass fibers carries up to 10,000 volts of direct current, fed directly from high-voltage stations on the shoreline. When you look at an undersea internet cable, you are looking at an incredibly long, high-voltage electrical extension cord designed to power a chain of amplifiers sitting in the abyss. Getting this massive, heavily armored, electrified system into the water takes years of planning and a fleet of specialized cable-laying ships. These vessels operate as floating industrial factories. The loading process alone takes weeks of continuous 24-hour work, carefully coiling thousands of miles of cable by hand into massive holding tanks so it doesn't tangle. Out in the deep ocean, massive mechanical wheels called linear cable engines grip the line, slowly spooling it out the back and controlling the tension precisely so it doesn't plummet to the bottom. As the ship approaches the vulnerable shallow waters near the coast, it deploys a heavily engineered underwater plow. Towed along the seafloor, the plow digs a deep trench into the sand, feeds the thick armored cable directly in, and then buries it to physically hide the infrastructure from ships above. Eventually, the line hits the shore. It connects to a hidden piece of infrastructure called a beach manhole, splicing the wet ocean cable to a dry terrestrial line. From there, it travels to a cable landing station. typically a windowless, concrete warehouse disguised to blend seamlessly into the coastal environment. Inside that facility, the two massive systems meet. The 10,000 volts of electricity are managed, and the incoming optical light is caught, converted back into electrical data, and routed out to the data centers that power the internet you interact with. Despite the thick steel armor, the deep-sea plows, and the careful route planning, the system breaks. Submarine cables are violently severed roughly 100 times every single year. Most of the time, the culprit is a commercial ship dragging its anchor through a shallow coastal zone. Further out, underwater earthquakes can trigger massive submarine avalanches of mud and rock that snap the line under immense weight. When a cable breaks, you don't lose your connection. The system holds because of a massive logistical safety net, redundancy. Your data is instantly and automatically rerouted through neighboring parallel cables heading in the same general direction. You might experience a slight delay measured in milliseconds. Meanwhile, engineers on shore begin a physical repair operation. Because they know the exact electrical resistance of the cable, they measure the voltage drop and pinpoint the exact location of a break in the middle of the ocean, down to a few miles. A specialized repair ship races to those coordinates. Because the water is far too deep for divers, the crew drops a remotely operated submersible or drags massive grappling hooks along the muddy bottom to catch the severed line. They cut away the damaged sections and physically haul thousands of feet of wet cable up to the surface under extreme tension. On the deck, in a sterile room, engineers manually splice the hair-thin glass fibers back together under microscopes, while the ship pitches and rolls in the ocean. They rebuild the copper tube, reapply the heavy steel armor, seal it all in plastic, and carefully lower the repaired loop back into the water. We design our entire modern civilization around the assumption that data moves effortlessly across the globe. But the next time you pull up a website or stream a video, and your device shows the little icon for Wi-Fi or cellular data, remember the sheer scale of the physical machinery making that happen. Your connection is only wireless for the final few feet of its journey. Everything else depends on a massive, heavy, electrified machine resting quietly in the absolute dark at the bottom of the sea.